In the last section, we added an action creator, very simple one, for handling a user typing in some text to the email field of our login form. But we still need to wire that up to the component on email change right here. The other thing that I mentioned was that, I'm getting kind of tired of this error message right here. If you are using ESLint, again, not required for this course. I gave instructions on how to set it up much earlier in the course, but it's not a requirement to get through anything. This arrow body style error right here just gets a little bit annoying over time. So in case you're interested in turning off any singular rule here, it's actually really straightforward. I'm going to open up my ESLint config, and again, you do not have to do this if if you're not running ESLint. If I want to turn off a single rule here, I can add in a rules section to my ESLint RC and point it to an object, and then inside of here, I'm going to put the name of the rule that I care about. You can get the name of the rule that you care about by just kind of looking at the error. So in this case, it's arrow body style. So I'll say arrow body style, and I just set that to 0, like so. Make sure that you've got double quotes around everything. You got to have double quotes. So now I can save this, and then if I run my linter again, you can see that error message goes away. So that's how you turn off single errors. But it's only single errors, so if I make like a really bad typo, yeah, it's still gonna catch everything else. Anyways, back on topic. We made our action creator. We just have to wire it up to our login form now. So again, we know how to do that. We're going to import our connect helper. We're going to import our action creator and then hook it up to our component with the connect helper. So at the top, let's do our import for connect from React Redux. And then we will import our action creator, which is email changed. That's the name of it. Email changed from the actions folder. And because, again, I've said this so many times, because this is the index file, we can get it just by referring to the actions directory. So now down at the bottom, we can hook up our action creator with the connect helper. I'll say connect, and then a separate set of parentheses for the login form. We do not have a map state to props function yet, so that will be null for right now. But then the second argument is going to be the action creator that we want to bind to our function, or excuse me, our component. So we'll say email changed, like so. Now, because we wired up our action creator, we now have access to a prop inside our component called this.props.emailChanged. So we can call this.props.emailChanged with the text that the user entered. So remember, again, this is behaving the exact same way as when we were using our set state call before. And this is kind of where we're at right now. The green is, well, I should be really clear. The green is the steps that we're on. The white is what we still have to implement. So we're now at a point where a user types something that's going to call our event handler, and our event handler calls that action creator with the new text. The action creator is going to return an action, and that action is going to be sent to all the different reducers inside our application. So we don't have a reducer yet to really receive this action and do anything with it. Right now we just have that single dummy reducer that we put together inside of our reducers file, which is, I guess, banana for whatever. I don't know who thought banana up. That's just ridiculous. Anyways, we want to replace this with a real reducer, something to catch that email changed action and actually, like do something with it, like record it or whatever it should be. I don't know. So we're going to want to create a new reducer to handle that action. I'm going to make a new reducers file to handle our new reducer. So inside of our reducers directory, I'll make a new file, and I'm going to call this one authreducer.js. I'm going to call it authreducer specifically because I want this single reducer to handle everything having to do with authentication inside my application. So it's going to handle the email and the password that's going to be entered. It's going to decide whether or not there's currently an error with authentication. It's also going to decide on whether or not we should show a spinner to the user. So one reducer responsible for all things authentication. So now that I've got my auth reducer file, before I forget, because I always forget it, I want to make sure that I wire it up to my combine reducers call. So inside of my reducers index.js file, I will import auth reducer from auth reducer. And then I'm going to place it into my combine reducers call. Remember, the key here, like the key, what I'm about to type right here, is going to be the property of state that I'm producing. So I could call this something like authentication, like full form. In practice, authentication is just a really long word. I know that's a really lame excuse, but honestly, I really like to just have auth, very simple, very straightforward. Everybody knows what it's talking about. So we'll say that the auth piece of state is produced by the auth reducer. Cool. So now that our reducer is wired up, we have to actually put the reducer together. So let's put together our boilerplate for reducer. Remember how that goes. We're going to create a function that has 2 arguments, and we're going to export it by default. So we'll export default, and then our reducer. The first argument is our state. The second is our action. And we've got the body of the reducer. We always have the exact same format for every reducer we write. We always have a switch statement, which is going to switch over the action's type. And depending on the type of the action, we'll decide what to do with it. But we do always have the default case, which is the case in which an action came across that we just don't care about, in which case we will default to just returning our state. Then the last thing to keep in mind is that we can never return undefined from a reducer. So the very first time the reducer is called, we have to have some initial or default state. So a common pattern that I really like to use is to make a variable that is just very clearly the initial state for this reducer. For me, it's going to be an object. And because my reducer is going to record the email that is being typed into that email field, I'm going to have an email piece of state, which by default is going to be a string. So this is a line right here that should really remind you back to that login form. Remember, we had the login form with that piece of state of email that was just an empty string. That is exactly what this is doing right here. This is supposed to be the value of the input. Like, this is what the user is actually typing. So by default, we'll use that initial state. Cool. So this is looking pretty good here. At this point in time, we now have one piece of state inside our entire application when our application first boots up. That is going to be state.auth.email, and that's going to be an empty string. So, wow, a lot of boilerplate, right? A lot of typing just to get these like basic text inputs put together. I know it's a lot of typing sometimes, but it all pays off on the long run as our application starts to get more complicated. Now we still have 2 more steps here. This reducer has to watch for an action of type email changed. And we need to also make sure that we then pipe that piece of state back into our component, our login form. So let's tackle those last 2 steps inside the next section.